Okay, I wanted to take a minute to go over the loan product section that we didn't have time to get to. There are essentially multiple different ways to evaluate which loan program makes the most sense for you specifically. Historically, the best way to do that is to compare the rate difference between product A and product B and try to figure out the pros and cons of each, and then deciding from there. Fixed rates tend to be better rates for what we call forever homes because the payment never changes, the rate never changes. That said, most people, even in their forever homes, don't keep their loans for 30 years. Just if you look back historically, there have always been refi cycles within any rolling 30-year period. So time horizon to me is a more important kind of analysis factor of determining which loan program makes sense. ARMs stand for adjustable rate mortgage. What they are is they are 30-year loans where the rate is fixed for a certain period of time. That's typically the first number in the ARM. And then they adjust thereafter from that point through the 30-year period. Historically, you should see a lower rate for ARMs because you're fixing the rate for a shorter period of time. That's why 30-year fixeds typically have the highest rate. You're fixing the rate for the entire 30 years. Whereas with a 7-year ARM, you're only fixing it for 7 years. So historically and logically, the 7-year rate should be a lot less. There are products like interest only, whereby you're only making the interest payments. You're not reducing any sort of principal balance. Those are much more difficult to qualify for because of the way that you are hit for a repayment amount on an interest-only ARM versus the standard 30-year fixed payment. So on an apples-to-apples basis, if somebody qualifies for $1 million loan max on a 30-year fixed, they'll end up at about a $680,000 interest-only qualification. So it's a substantial difference. So they're a lot harder to qualify for. They're obviously riskier propositions because you're not eradicating your principal balance, and in a rate market like this, they are priced at a premium. So in my opinion, the rate doesn't even make them a viable choice right now. Then obviously we have more out-of-the-box loan products, bridge loans, lot loans, construction loans, etc. So it's obviously a matter of not only understanding your goals for this specific house, but then your kind of goals in the long run as well to try to help figure out which bucket we end up in. So a lot of people want to know, I hear so much about these first-time homebuyer credits, no down payments, no closing costs. What's the deal with those? The takeaway is that most first-time homebuyer benefits the programs are launched based on national averages of purchase price, of loan amount, of borrower profile, etc. Well, in the Bay Area and most of California, that is a little bit outside the box for the national averages. So that was the case for a long while, where there were not very many benefits for California first-time homebuyers. FHA is a state-specific program, and they have loans that are designed to get as little as 0% down. Most recently, that was the Dream for All program that so many people were talking about that got funded this year, and then the funding was burned through in a matter of a few days. So as of right now, there are no funds available in that program. What it allowed for was zero down payment because they did an 80% first loan and then this 20% shared appreciation loan. So it wasn't that you were given 20% down towards your purchase. It was a loan that had a pretty healthy appreciation share to it. That said, the funding is gone for that. So the 0% down is really not an option in California. It puts us kind of back in the conventional or FHA standard box, which is a 3.5% minimum down payment. On the jumbo side, 10% down to certain marks, etc. Some employers specifically offer grants and or help with down payment and or closing costs. So you'll definitely want to check with your HR department. It's more rare than common that they do, but it's certainly worth looking into. And then the last is that some cities themselves have specific programs that they have available to them. The takeaway is that they're not free, right? They always come at a cost and have to be paid back, but they are available. So if we're trying to figure out how to compare a fixed rate loan where the rate and payment never changes to an adjustable rate mortgage, what are the ways to do that from a data standpoint that can be used for evaluating? What a lot of lenders will tell you is, we'll just get an ARM, the rate's lower, and don't worry about it, we'll just refinance. Well, that's likely true, and that should never be the only data point by which we measure, because it's not a data point, right? It's a possibility, and a lot would argue, including myself, a probability, but it's not a certainty. So from a data standpoint, the way that I look at comparing a fixed to an ARM is, let's say, for example, with a $975,000 loan amount, the 30-year fixed rate of 5.875%, this is for analysis purposes and data presentation purposes only. That's not a rate that I'm quoting. And if we compare that to a 10-year adjustable rate mortgage, where historically the rate should be about 3/8 lower, so 5.5%. So if we compare these just from a rate standpoint, how do we kind of get to some viable data in that comparison? Well, the way to do that is to look at what we could call cash flow savings, right? You're going to be making a lower monthly payment each month, so we can look at just straight lined cash flow savings. And then the other way that we can look at that is what I call an accelerated balance reduction standpoint. Because at some point you were willing to be able to make that 30-year payment, if we make that payment on the 10-year ARM, even though it's more than what is technically due, how does that add to the savings equation? And so I think that those are the best two methods to measure. From the cash flow savings, well, we know that the payment is less. So if we look at what the loan balance is at the end of 10 years, when that adjustable rate starts to adjust, the 30-year fixed balance would be $813,195. On the 10-1 ARM, for only making the 10-1 ARM payment, your balance is actually lower. It's at $804,745. Reason being is because it's got a lower interest rate, the amortization table has less interest, right? So the principal balance comes down faster. Along the way, you've also put in your pocket $27,786 in payment difference between the two. So that total then savings is $36,206.58. Therefore, if you are going into a house that you know you're not going to be in 10 years from now, it doesn't make sense to do a 30-year fixed if this rate difference exists for rate protection that you're not going to be using, right? Because you're basically throwing away $36,206.58. It even gets more skewed under the accelerated balance reduction. So in this case, we take that 30-year payment and we make it on the 10-1 ARM. As we know from the 30-year fixed, it would go from a loan balance of $975 down to that $813,195. On the 10-1 ARM, that balance would go down even further to $767,841. By putting that cash flow savings to work, we've now reduced the balance even further. To the tune of $45,354.58. So it's an additional savings of $9,000 that you got from putting that $27,000 to work. So in my opinion, this is kind of the way to analyze what makes more sense. Now, right, it comes down to, at the day that we go to lock in your rate when you are in contract on a new home, what does the rate environment look like? What is the rate difference between ARM and fixed, et cetera? But this is designed to show that you're aligned with people that know how to evaluate this stuff, and we will certainly help you do that along the way in a way that makes sense for you, not that makes sense for the bank. Okay, so every client out there talks about, asks about, and places importance, rightfully so, on their rate. At the pre-approval phase, most of my clients open the initial conversation with, well, I'd like to get a great sense of the rates. It's a completely moot point at the time of pre-approval, right? Because the rate lock is tied to the property address, which means that the soonest anybody can lock in the rate is the day that you are in contract on the home, not the date that you get pre-approved. The rate at pre-approval is an absolutely moot point. Now, that doesn't detract from the importance of getting the best rate. My industry has just trained clients to only be focused on that, and frankly, at the wrong time throughout the equation. So when clients say to me, how do I really get the lowest rate? To me, it's pretty simple, but it isn't necessarily intuitive based upon the way that my industry has trained its customers to think. The best way to get the lowest rate is to work with somebody experienced, right? More than just a loan officer or an order taker. You want to be aligned with somebody that has financial services expertise, background, and experience. Because in the long run, the way that we will minimize your rate and therefore drastically reduce your interest expenses is on the ultimate financing. When you buy a home, you're essentially forced to lock in a rate within that closing period, right? So the rate, even at the time that you will lock it, is a completely relative experience. The most important factor comes in subsequent to purchasing a home, right? It's most lenders stop working for their clients when they fund the loan, right? We did the loan, got you your home, thanks a lot. Our job for you really starts at funding. What we're doing is we are then constantly scrubbing the current market and comparing that against the rates of our existing clients. We have a data model that we run every morning that tells us, based upon these factors, these are the clients you should be talking to about a refinance. And it's evaluating more than just, hey, you can lower your payment, right? Most lenders will tell you when they're talking about a refinance, we can lower your payment. That's completely meaningless in and of itself. You could absolutely drastically increase your total costs in interest, in transaction, etc., by focusing only on a payment decrease. That's in the benefit of the lender because they get to start the loan over and serve you a new loan. The metrics that matter are, what are the total interest savings over the life of the existing loan in terms of what's left and over the new loan that's starting over, and comparing those. And then also looking at cash flow savings and then how you can deploy those savings into other asset classes to make more on the total earnings of interest on the earning side of the equation. So there's definitely much more involved than just a payment savings. So if somebody says, I want the lowest rate, I would say, great, lock your loan on December 17th, 2020. Well, why does that date matter? Because everybody in our pipeline got a phone call on that day saying, we need to lock in an interest rate if you are looking to refinance anytime, period. Because it was when rates hit their lowest, right? You can see at the baseline of that graph, which shows the 30-year mortgage rate and the 10-year treasury, which is the biggest driver of interest rates, was right at the end of 2020. So by using that then data model that we run every morning, we got this lock alert. Hey, you need to reach out to these clients to get them locked. So if we go by the more traditional route, right? Like, well, what's the lowest rate I can get at the time of purchase? Let's look at a situation where we have $1 million loan in January of 2020. And let's just say that I was an eighth higher than the other guy that you were talking to, right? So on paper, sure, it looks like it's a savings. It's a monthly savings of $71.78. Do I feel strongly that I'm worth more than $71.78 a month? Darn right I do, but that's not for me to decide. So if we said, yeah, no, that's too much, I'm going to go with the other guy and save $71.78 a month. Okay, short-term savings. On that date in December of 2020, I could have locked you in at 2.625, and I would have been on the phone getting a hold of you all day saying, we need to go. Let's say the other guy was waiting for you to call him, and you finally hear from a friend of a friend that got to refinance, and you call the other guy, and he says, great, today I can lock you in at 3%. That's a great rate, right? Anybody with 3% right now is doing backflips, but you could add 2.625. So if we look at then the total interest savings of the other guy, it cost you almost $72,000. Therefore, if we look at how you truly get the best rate, it would have been align yourself with somebody that's going to continue to look out for you and evaluate things in the long run, not just look at this as a transaction in a snippet of time. It's just a different way for me to say that rate absolutely matters. And there are so many more things that I think matter more. I think you will too.